Hello and welcome to this reflective prayer walk, which today is coming from the Royal Horticultural Society garden of Wisley near Guildford. You may recognise this view of the glasshouse, the modern futuristic design which was completed a few years ago. Wisley itself was, of course, like many places, closed during the bulk of the lockdown period, but now it's very much working and open again. And today we're going to take a walk through the garden, and as we walk we're going to reflect on some words from the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 1, the story of creation. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was good. God saw that it was good. And as we walk today, let's just hold those words in our hearts and in our minds. God saw that it was good. So much of what we're all living through at the moment can feel like it's anything but good. There seem to be so many challenges at home, overseas. COVID-19, the world political stage is as confused and chaotic as ever. Sometimes we need to take a step back and remember that God's creation is indeed very good. That there is so much in the world around us to be thankful for. Easy to remember on the days when the sun is shining, the skies are blue. Days like today, a little bit more difficult because it's been raining very hard. The clouds this afternoon are just beginning to lift a little bit. And so we can begin to look around again and say that God saw it was all very good. You probably remember from the story of creation that God places the man and the woman in the garden of God's delight, the Garden of Eden. For many people, being in gardens is very special. It gives a chance to reflect on the beauty of God's creation. That mix of sort of order and orderliness, the way that human beings will always try to create order in their surroundings. And then sometimes the more chaotic parts as well. The parts where it's not always a case of everything going according to plan, where there's a bit of randomness, a bit of riotousness in what's happening. Gardens like Wisley can be great places for appreciating all of that. You have the formal structures, you also have the parts that are just that bit more chaotic. And as we pause and look around, so we can see just how much beauty there is in the midst of it all. grasses are some of my favourite types of plants for all the gentle sounds that they bring, the detail in all the feathery flowering tops of the grass itself. When we look at scenes like this, it's easy to remember that God saw. It was all very good. Many people have been influenced by gardens across history. And there's a poem which speaks about gardens and how close we can feel to God sometimes, which I first saw on a tombstone in a graveyard, and the verse struck me at the time as being both very simple and yet quite profound. It relates us back to the beauty of nature and how easy it is when we're walking in nature to feel connected with God again. The poem is called God's Garden by Dorothy Frances Gurney. So far as I can see, it's one of the only poems of hers that anybody ever quotes. And the particular verse I want to share with you today is the one that goes, "The kiss of the sun for pardon, the song of the birds for mirth. One is nearer God's heart in a garden than anywhere else on earth." One is nearer God's heart in a garden than anywhere else on earth. And of course, you always have to be a little bit cautious about embracing such vivid imagery and saying that gardens are the places where you get closest to God, because what does that say about all those countless people who don't have access to beautiful places like this, who don't have those opportunities? So maybe what we're trying to say is that one of the places we can feel close to God is in a garden. But it's not exclusively that is where God sees that things are good. One of the things we might explore in some more of these walks is, where else do we see God at work? But here, in all of this profusion, we can't help but be reminded of that story of creation. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was good. You can probably hear in the background quite a lot of excited children playing games, running around enjoying the open space. How good it is for them to be able to rejoice in simply being alive, being part of God's creation, part of all that God gazes on, part of all that God sees is very good. One of the exciting things about any garden is the mix between what is created by human beings, talented horticulturalists, those who do so much to bring new species to our attention, those who do so much work to protect the species that are threatened with extinction. And that whole interaction between us as the custodians of the planet and the planet itself, well, that's a huge, huge topic, and one which it feels really important that we try to hold on to as we consider our own place in God's creation. You may remember, I'm sure many of you remember, Joy Todd, who worshipped for many years in our parish, was a much loved priest, friend, colleague. Well, she was passionate about her gardening. She, I think, would have recognised those words of Dorothy Frances Gurney: one is nearer God's heart in a garden than anywhere else on earth. And she loved to tend her own back garden, her own patch, her own small corner of God's wonderful creation. And in a way, isn't that what we're all called to do? To look after our own part of God's creation as best we possibly can. This time of year, of course, is the time when we celebrate harvest and we rejoice in the gift of God's creation and both our responsibilities for it, but also the extraordinary way in which creation provides for us. Coming up here through the orchard is a great reminder, isn't it, of the inventiveness of human beings in planting and cultivating crops, but also that once the crop's planted, it's not all down to us. It's the creation itself. It's all that God wonderfully set to work that actually produces the things on which we depend so much. We may plant the trees, but after that, it's down to the climate, it's down to the rain, the warmth, to produce the crops. Little wonder, perhaps, that the writers of the book of Genesis were so confident that God saw that it was all so very good. You may have your own garden. You may not like gardening at all. You may find your own places which remind you of the glory of God's creation. Wherever you look and find your inspiration, I hope that this walk together, looking at probably a very familiar part of our own surroundings, or maybe somewhere you've not been for some time. I hope this has been a chance just to pause, to reflect, and to remember once again the wonder of God's creation, and to be reminded that God rejoices in every part of that creation, in everything that God made, in you, in me, the whole of our world. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you peace, today and always. Amen.